Before we jump into today's episode, I am so excited to be able to tell you that my debut book, Optimal You, Supercharge Your Energy, Strengthen Your Immunity, is now published. Optimal You is a groundbreaking guide uncovering the 8 pillars of health for supercharged energy and strengthened immunity to optimize your health and extend your health span. Delve into evidence-based strategies to optimize nutrition, balance your lifestyle, reduce toxin exposure, and address root causes of health imbalances. It includes a 14-step anti-inflammatory nutrition blueprint to supercharge your mitochondria and fortify your immune system. Plus, you get my 4 lifestyle S's: sleep, stress, strength, and social, that form the foundation of optimal well-being. On top of all that, when you buy the book, you get access to a special area on the website that gives you all the resources, plus recipes and guides that we talk about within the book. You can empower yourself with practical tools and insights to embark on a transformative journey towards Optimal You. Head over to optimalyoubook.com to get your copy now, or you can get your copy from Amazon worldwide or your local bookstore. When you've got your copy, don't forget to share on social media, tag me in it at good_health, GOODE, and use the hashtag OptimalYouBook. I can't wait to see what you think of the book, and I really hope that it brings you lots of health and wellness. Now let's head to today's episode. Welcome to the Good Health Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Good, a certified functional medicine practitioner, registered nutritionist, and author. In this podcast, we delve into the world of energy and immune health and wellness with positivity, from optimal health and energy to stress and burnout, right through to immune conditions such as thyroid and autoimmune disease. We deep dive into functional medicine, nutritional medicine, and lifestyle medicine, as well as the personal stories of our amazing guests, from Olympians to famous faces and guest experts from all different parts of the health and wellness world. It's time to stop letting your health hold you back and become the optimal version of you. Don't forget to come and join the conversation on Instagram at good_health, that's GOODE, or visit the website nicolegoodhealth.com to find out more. Welcome to today's episode of the Good Health Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Good, certified functional medicine practitioner, registered nutritional therapist, and author of the book Optimal You. In today's episode, we're talking about children's health. We're looking at anxiety, depression, ADHD, and general societal changes on children's health. Joining me, I've got Monica, who you may remember from one of the Wellness Chat episodes that we had recently. Monica studied biology at the University College London. She then trained as a broadcast journalist with a health specialism and had a 10-year career in television news with a very busy and frantic life. She then had her children, and after some health issues of her own, she decided to make a change and heal herself through food and lifestyle. Going on that journey led her to retraining and doing a 4-year professional diploma at the renowned Institute for Optimum Nutrition. She's a registered nutritional therapist, and she looks at each client as an individual. She works passionately on hormonal imbalances, irritable bowel, weight gain, food intolerances, poor sleep, low energy, and children's health. So with that, let's jump straight into the conversation and see how you could be helping your child to live well. Okay, Monica, thank you so much for joining me on the Good Health Podcast today. It's great to have you here, and I'm looking forward to this episode.
Thank you for having me on the show.
So today we're focusing on children's health. But first of all, before we kind of dig into today's episode, tell us a little bit about your background, why you ended up in nutrition, and what led you to doing the work that you do today.
Oh, wow. What a long story. My first degree I did a degree in biology at UCL. Didn't have a clue what I wanted to do, but always was very fascinated with health and how the body works. And I considered medicine, but there was something about it that didn't sit with me. I felt like there was more I wanted rather than just medicating people. I felt that there was a deeper way to be able to heal people. But, there wasn't this kind of nutritional therapy world out there back in the day when I was sort of 20, 21. So I ended up doing biology, and then I did a year in broadcast journalism, became a TV journalist. Totally different to what I'm doing now. I went off and had 3 children, 3 wonderful kids, retrained for 4 years at ION, and I'm here now doing this and loving it.
I love it. You actually have quite a similar story to me, because I did neuroscience originally, didn't know what I wanted to do when I was ill myself and didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I went totally off-piste and went into law.
Oh, wow.
And so totally ended up in a completely different career. And then retrained into this, again, a similar story to you with the medicine and finding something else. So we have quite a similar story in a different way. So you're journey to work with people of all age groups, but today we're sort of looking at that children's health as the topic of today's episode. How do you feel that children's health has changed in the last, let's say, like in the last 10 years, or I mean, even probably there's been huge changes, I would imagine, in the last few years. But what are the biggest kind of concerns that you see today that weren't an issue maybe when we were children, when we were growing up?
The majority of the kids that come in to see me are coming in for behavioral issues, stress, anxiety, low mood. I mean, the number of kids that are on antidepressants or medications for ADHD, it's sad, and it's actually quite shocking. So we have to look and think, why? What's happened? What's gone wrong? What's changed in the environment? Our genes can't have changed that quickly from my generation to the next generations, which has always been around. You know, I'm not saying these are all new issues. It's just the number of these issues and the number of children that are really struggling has definitely risen. And parents are looking outside of just general medicine to try and see what they can do to help support their children. And so I see some of those kids in my clinic, and environment is something we have to consider. So screens, you can't really talk about children and health without venturing into screens. Obviously, lots of screens going on, which can cause anxiety. Social media is a problem. Not able to come off their screens, which sometimes causes anger because of high dopamine levels. There's academic life is very stressful. I think much more stressful than when I was a child. I think kids are spending less time outside, less sports. And I think something that's also changed with regards to parenting, and I want to raise it here because I think it's really important. This generation of parents, I feel, and this is just my opinion, we over worry, and me included, by the way. I'm not going to ever sit here and say, oh, I've got it all sorted with my children. But I think we over concern ourselves with our children's anxiety, stress, mood, depression, as you know, if we want to go and give it a really strong label. I think I try to remind parents in my clinic that these are all normal, very, very normal teenage childhood emotions. Trying to fix them all the time is sometimes actually causing greater problems for children.
More anxiety around it, I would imagine.
Yes, exactly that. So if your child comes to you and says, oh, mum, I'm feeling depressed, and you think, oh my God, we need to see a psychologist, we need antidepressants, actually sit with it. You're feeling depressed. Okay, so feel depressed. Feel the emotions, understand why you're feeling what you're feeling, and then you need to find a way to come out of it. Because if we're continually trying to wrap them up in cotton wool and protect them from what I can only describe as very normal human emotions, you know, you're preventing them from actually experiencing and feeling and learning how to manage and deal with those emotions.
And developing, yeah, because it's important to learn those emotions.
For sure, for sure. Now, that said, there is another side where it becomes so extreme that kids are now really not coping, not able to go into school. I've got some kids who see me that can't go to school, that have no relationships with other people, that can't sleep through the night. You need to get involved in those cases, and you need to do whatever you can to support the parents and the kids.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it, because we've become a society where everything is so fast. And, you know, fashion, for example, it's like throwaway fashion. You know, we want something and we want it now, and then we're done with it and we get rid of it. It's that same thought process, I guess, in a way, of if a child comes home and says, I'm feeling a bit anxious or whatever it might be, we need to fix this and it needs to be done now. And we want that magic pill to do it.
I think that's the point. I think that's how I feel. But, you know, we do have to acknowledge that there is a lot more, I think, stress on the kids than there was, let's say. And our environment isn't supportive of their emotions. So obviously we're mainly here to talk about food, but it's environmental toxins, food, not getting enough of the right nutrition. And that's going to be problematic when you need to make things like your happy hormones or your feel-good hormones, or making too much adrenaline and not being able to break that down. And I think that's where nutrition can be really, really helpful and a really incredible tool. A lot of the kids I work with, we look at something called SNPs. If you think about genetics, like your eye color, if you're born with brown eyes, it doesn't matter what supplements I give you, I'm never going to be able to give you green eyes. It doesn't matter how much meditation you do. So what I work with are genetic SNPs. So they're single nucleotide polymorphisms. So a much more simpler piece of the puzzle, a much smaller piece of the puzzle. The best way I can describe this, and this is what I generally say to my clients, you can be born with a Ferrari, but if I put black ice on the road, your Ferrari's not going to drive very well. Likewise, I can give you, you know, a really beaten down, battered 20-year-old Ford Fiat, but if it's a really sunny day and you've had your tires changed, you're going to have no problems on the road. This is where things are going wrong for people is their genes might be okay, but when you add in not enough of the right nutrition, too much stress, not enough exercise, too much in the way of screens, or too much dopamine, suddenly the kids are vaping at 13, 10, 11, 12, whatever, however young, you're messing with their systems, and then you're messing with their neurotransmitters, and suddenly their mood is going off. And you're thinking, well, what's wrong? How can I support them? What's gone wrong? So that's when people come to me, and then I can explain it in the context of their specific bodies and what their particular body needs and how to best support their body. And then we add things in, we add foods in to support pathways to make those neurotransmitters they might be struggling with. And you can see change really quickly. I mean, when I say really quickly, Nicole, sometimes within 24, 48 hours, you can massively see a change in a child's mood and temperament just from adding a supplement in or changing up their diet a bit. And that's where the magic is for me.
Yeah. And I think it's that gene expression, isn't it, that we talk about. We've all got a set of genes, but we can turn them on or off depending on what we're eating. And food is not just to fill us up. This is where that sort of food as a messenger comes from, because it's telling everything in our body what to do. The nutrients that we've got, it's telling our body what to do. And it is sending messages around our whole body, and it changes how genes do express. And I think it's important that, parents do understand that as well. You mentioned the neurotransmitters there. So let's dig into neurotransmitters a little bit. Because I think this is a really interesting one, I think, particularly with children, like you said, with all the anxiety and the stress and the mood, a lot of the children's health stuff does tend to come around that. So,
and ADHD, that's another big one.
And ADHD. Yeah. And neurotransmitters play such a big role in this. And this is this sort of brain chemistry that we're talking about. Let's talk about dopamine. This is kind of the big one that maybe people have heard a little bit of. They've probably seen articles about sort of, junk food or social media or PlayStations. Is it still PlayStations? And it was when I was around, when I was a kid. But yeah, whatever the gaming things are these days, all of those things that children are doing, giving them that sort of dopamine hit. How do all these things change the dopamine, and how do they impact? Do they impact the child? Do they impact the brain development? Is it just an emotional impact that we're seeing?
So I think there are different factors. First of all, you've got to work out, is the child actually able to make enough dopamine? So some people genetically, with these genetic SNPs we've been talking about, they struggle to actually make dopamine. In other cases, they make too much of it. And when you keep getting these hits, you become dopamine resistant. So you need bigger and bigger and bigger hits. And then there's another issue with dopamine, which I think can often be a big problem, is that when dopamine levels go too high and you're not able to break this chemical down fast enough or well enough, that can turn into anger and rage. And that's those kids that from nowhere snap, they come off the screens and then they snap, and the parents don't know what's happened, and they say, my child's got anger issues. And it's all about just trying to get those kids a bit more balanced and saying, okay, potentially, is dopamine too high? Is dopamine too low? How can we balance that better? What can we change in the environment? And what can we change in that child's food to help balance it a little bit better? So, for example, with children with ADHD, the theory behind ADHD is that they don't make enough dopamine. And so that's that hyperactive behavior where they're going out seeking it and looking for it. So if you can give them that increased dopamine through food, through exercise, through improved dopamine production, and also improved dopamine sensitivity, so that there isn't just an issue of actually being able to make these neurotransmitters, it's also how well does that child actually feel it? And if you're not able to feel it as well genetically, then you might need support in that area too.
And is it a case of sort of saying to parents, like, the children can't be on these gaming machines, they can't be on social media, they've got to come off screens completely? Is it an all or nothing thing? Or is it a case of you can balance things out and then, a certain amount of time doing these things is okay?
Well, I think we have to be realistic, don't we? I mean, like I said, I've got 3 kids, and if I forced them to do everything I knew was right for them all the time, I'd probably end up with 3 very messed up children one way or another, because they'd be so extreme, or they'd completely rebel against me and do everything behind my back. So I think it's all about getting the balance as right as possible for that individual child. And sometimes it's small changes. So as an example, I had a kid come in with his mum, and I think we spent his mother spent the first 10 minutes of the session just trying to get him off the phone so he could focus on me. And there was another young guy I spoke to, and it was an online consultation because he refused to leave his house, and he was late teenager refusing to go to school. And he gamed through the session. Like he was quite happily, openly gaming. So his eyes weren't on me and he was barely focused on me. And his father was on the call with me and with him. And it was okay for this 14, actually, I think he was a bit older, maybe 17-year-old to be gaming while we were having our consultation, which in the real world, you just absolutely never do. So I think it is about balance. Yes, I let my kids go on screens. I limit their social media. Actually, some of my kids don't have social media or are very, very limited with the amount of social media they have. But am I right? Is it right? Is the balance right? You're always going to question yourself. I think as a parent, do I ever do something knowing I'm harming my child? I think that's the question you have to ask yourself. And if the answer is yes, then you've got to address that one way or another and not get so drawn into what everybody else is doing and what everyone else is allowing their kids to do. So I think you can start with smaller changes. It doesn't need to be no screens, but we need to stop screens in the evenings because that's wiring you up too much and stopping you from sleeping.
But that's the same for everybody, right? That's not just children.
Absolutely. But Nicole, what percentage of your clients tell you that they struggle with sleep?
Yeah. And that comes from, like you said, from screens and everything like that, but also from, artificial light as well. If if we go back when it went dark and we went to bed, and we don't have that sort of luxury anymore. We see all these modern things as luxuries, but actually they are changing our circadian rhythm. They're changing lots of things in us, and our body isn't keeping up with the speed of technology that's changing. But you can't stop screens, I don't think, completely, exactly like you said, because the reality is these children have got to grow up and they've got to go to work. And much like you and I are doing now, we are on a screen filming a podcast for work, and we need computers. I couldn't do my job without a computer. Screens and technology are going to be a part of all children's lives, every person's lives on the planet. We're never going to get away from that now. We're never going to go backwards so far that we get away.
I agree. Implementing, let's say, downtime every day, or loads of teenage girls that will come in and I'll say, you know what, do your skincare routine before you go to bed. Leave your phone downstairs. In our house, I try and say, leave the phone in the kitchen. It's about managing it. It's about balancing it. And also going outside. That's another thing we haven't really talked about. But parents, we spoke about them being a bit panicky about their children and about their emotions, but they're also today very panicked about physical, aspects of their kids. Oh, no, don't climb the tree. You might fall and break your arm, or everything's safe.
There was a social media post the other day that I saw, and it was a woman. She put a picture of herself up. She's in business, and it was just a picture of herself, and across it she put, "I was born in the 80s. Don't mess with me. I know what it means to be out there as a real person." And I was like, it's totally it totally makes sense. She's like, and I know the world is a different place. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that,
Is it, Nicole? Is it like there was always drugs. There was always smoking. Yeah. We've also become we pander a bit too much, and we're overly worried. We're overly concerned, and all that anxiety is getting reflected on our kids one way or another. And then we're not allowing them to feel. We are responsible for some of it as parents. And I'm holding my hand up for that too,
Yeah, it's really interesting how society has changed and how much it's changed, I think, in such a short space of time as well. If we go beyond the dopamine, sort of coming back to the neurotransmitters, what about the other neurotransmitters? What about things like serotonin, GABA? What sort of role do they play in this?
Yeah, very interesting. For the two that you've raised, I'd say those two are probably really, really big ones in my practice that I look at. So let's go for serotonin first. So serotonin is your happy hormone. Are you feeling depressed? Are you happy? Are you joyful? And the biggest issue I see with serotonin is some kids genetically struggle to make I say kids, we're really talking about everybody here, but some people struggle to make serotonin genetically. Now, to make serotonin, one of the building blocks that you need to make it is something called tryptophan. Tryptophan is found in an amino acid. It's an amino acid. It's found in protein. So if you're a vegetarian 12-year-old girl, you are probably now slightly protein deficient, potentially protein deficient. Then let's add on that your period starts. So you're slightly protein deficient. You're not eating any red meat, and you've started having a period, and your iron levels are beginning to drop. So you need tryptophan to actually make serotonin. And for that conversion to happen, you need some iron to make that conversion happen, and to make that serotonin formation take place. So you now have this 12, 13-year-old child who is depressed suddenly. She's 12, 13, and she's feeling really, really low. So yes, there's an element that she's 12 and that's a completely normal emotion for a 12-year-old to have. But when it becomes severe, we need to go, okay, hold on a minute. What's going on with her diet? What's going on that could potentially be causing this lower level of happy hormone? And then you think, okay, well, is she getting enough protein in? Many kids aren't. And the reason they aren't is because they're stocking up on junk foods. They're stocking up on what I call empty processed food, high calorie and low nutrition dense food. Anything really in a packet is something I'd class as that sort of processed packet food. In addition to that, 90% of your serotonin is made in your gut. If your gut's not functioning properly, and a lot of these kids that are living on junk food, their gut isn't functioning properly, then they're not going to be able to make serotonin in the place it's supposed to be made anyway. So this is the sort of work I do. Have you got the bare basics in place? Are you eating enough iron? Vitamin D is another precursor to making serotonin. Is tryptophan, which is that amino acid, that protein we discussed, is there enough of that in the diet? Are they getting enough green leafy vegetables? Because that's another catalyst to help make serotonin. Magnesium, B6, zinc. These are all really important. If a child is eating a very highly processed diet, they are going to struggle to make serotonin if their genes are all amazing. Now slip in that they might have these genetic slips that aren't ideal. Suddenly you've got a 13-year-old who needs to be on antidepressants. That's actually tragic.
Yeah, it is. It's really sad. And it shows you how small changes could make such a big difference.
Oh, absolutely. And I think I hope that's the key message is just because your child is feeling depressed or because your child has ADHD or because your child has an issue with their dopamine and the anger, there's so much that can be done, so much that can be done. I mean, there's a couple of wonderful psychologists that I work with that have now they've now begun to refer to me because they say, talking therapy will take a child or an adolescent so far, but they'll say, you know what, I feel that you need nutritional support. I'm talking about kids who everything can actually seem fine in their life, but their mood is wrong. Their mood is off, and I think everybody knows this sort of process packaged. So yeah, that's serotonin. And I think the other one that you mentioned was GABA, which I think people don't know or haven't heard of as much, the other two that you raised. And GABA is one I tend to see issues with kids with ADHD. I think generally medicine, modern medicine has kind of put together dopamine and ADHD as being the kind of main link, the main neurotransmitter link. But I think GABA and glutamate, which work hand in hand, is something that always comes up and often comes up with ADHD kids. If you remember, Chinese restaurants there was this whole period where we were told, oh, don't put monosodium glutamate in food, because it was making children really, really hyper. And actually, it's that glutamate neurotransmitter that's that hyperactivity that needs to be changed by the body into GABA, which the best way I can describe it is it's like having a glass of wine at the end of a really long day. That's that feeling of calm. And for a lot of children, they struggle to transfer glutamate to GABA. And again, it can be from diet. So it can be lack of things like B6 and zinc. It can also be a genetic, there can be a genetic predisposition towards it. So when you start to support that pathway, suddenly the children are calmer. Something like lemon balm tea in the evening for those children can be really helpful. Matcha contains something called L-theanine in it, and that also can be really helpful with GABA. I find that pathway really interesting with kids, especially those with ADHD.
Let's just dig into gut health. The neurotransmitters, obviously, we're talking about brain health. We're talking about anxiety and stress and ADHD, which are all kind of classed as being that neurological type of condition or symptom. And we know that there is a huge connection between gut health and brain health. We know that there's that gut-brain link. Are there any sort of signs that parents can look out for if there are the gut health issues that could be impacting, apart from obviously the anxiety and things like that? Are there any signs that parents can look for where they might be able to sort of say, I think gut health is an issue? Or is it just a case of if a child really is struggling with anxiety or depression or ADHD that we should be looking at the gut health anyway?
It's a funny one, this one, Nicole, because when people come in to see me, when kids come in to see me, often their mothers or their parents don't know what their gut health is like because you don't follow your 8-year-old to the toilet. So some families don't talk about it. It's quite taboo. Are you letting off gas, or have you got runny poo, or is it really hard and pellety? I tend to find kids are generally more constipated, and for them, that's normal. So when you say, do you have a normal poo? They'll say yes. And then when I show them something called the Bristol stool chart, which breaks down different kind of consistencies of poo, and there's one in the middle that's the kind of what we consider the optimal consistency. They tend not to choose that one, and they tend to choose the more constipated ones or the more looser, runny stools. So I tend to use that in clinic to try and ascertain whether there is an issue there or not. Sometimes the parents will notice that they're very burpy or more bloated or have more flatulence as well. But yeah, sometimes it feels embarrassing for the kids to discuss these topics. So I think parents need to open that up and have that conversation. Obviously, we're talking about gut health, so I have to touch on what we can do as nutritional therapists or as parents to help support kids and their gut health. I mean, we've got this now in the press. It used to be the 5 a day. I personally prefer the 30 a week model. I'm sure you know is this concept of having 30 different plant-based foods a week, because each different plant-based food acts as a fertilizer for the bacteria growing in our gut, our microbiome, which are really key for making serotonin, as we discussed before, but actually for all processes in the body, for immune system, for mental health. We don't understand or know anywhere near, I think, what we're going to discover in the future. And what we know already is that the gut microbiome is fundamental. It's pivotal to our health. So making sure that our kids, our adolescents, young adults have got good gut health is really important. So trying to hit those 30 a week, I think can be a really good game. You can print out, there's plenty of sheets online where you can do a sort of tick off list. And I get my kids or the kids that come and see me in clinic to tick off 30 of my plant-based foods in a week. And I'm happy to send you that form if you've got any notes for the show that you would.
Yeah, we can put it in the show notes below.
Yeah, more than happy to do that. And small changes like sprinkling some mixed seeds over your food. Suddenly you're adding 4 or 5 different plant-based foods to a salad, which can have, again, 4 or 5 different things in it. And then when you put olive oil as a dressing, you've added another ingredient. And then when you're having that with a curry, adding onion, garlic, turmeric, chili, spices, herbs, it's not that hard. People say 30 a week and it feels really difficult.
I do, because obviously for autoimmune, it's for the immune health, gut immune link obviously is a big one as well. And I do 50 foods a week. So yeah, 30 is still obviously a lot more than a lot of people are eating. And I mean, I've had people come in where their starting position on doing something like that is 10, 12, and that a week, we're talking here, not a day. Yeah, easily. I get the odd person who comes in because they have autoimmune and they sort of done some reading and they are quite aware of things who are hitting those sort of higher between the 30 and 50 kind of bracket of numbers. But most people who come in are not. Most of them are hitting maybe 10, if we're lucky, 20. And it's something I always do with people. One of the first things is that diversity, the 50 foods or 30 foods in your case. Even if it's a case of like I'm doing that initial consultation with people where we're taking the health history. So we're not necessarily building a plan at that point. I'm gleaning the health history from them and we're trying to figure out what's going on. And obviously I've worked with people where that health history can take a long time because it might be, 50 years of health history that we're trying to gain. It might be that I say to them, look, just to get started, just start on some of these very simple steps and let's just get those sort of real foundational things in place. But quite often people do notice a big impact from just doing those small foundational steps that's before we even dig into doing any of the complex work.
For sure. I agree with you. And I think when it comes to kids as well, getting them involved in the cooking, if they know they've got to hit that target, saying to them, okay, let's make a soup. In fact, I went through a period where my youngest suddenly decided he didn't want to eat vegetables. I think he was 3 years old. What I did is I lifted him up, probably not meant to do this for health and safety reasons, but I lifted him up on the kitchen counter as I was making a soup and I laid out all the spices and herbs in our spice cupboard and I made him smell all of them. And I said, I want you to flavor the soup. And he did. And he demolished the soup because he'd taken control and it was his soup. And that was a pivotal moment for him where he said, okay, I'm happy to flavor the food and start enjoying vegetables again.
And that's something that we used to do, isn't it? We used, children always used to cook or bake with grandparents and parents. It was such a very normal thing. You be careful with like hot foods and things, sharp knives and stuff like that. But I was always involved in cooking and baking with grandparents and parents. And through nobody's fault, I think, just because we're all so busy.
I agree.
It's really important, I think, to start children off in that because it does set them up for life.
I think that's the point. I think if you can get kids in the kitchen, you know, making things that are basic, even if you make things that are fun. Sometimes with the kids in my clinic, I'll teach them to prepare breakfast the night before. You know, we're talking yogurt with a little bit of a low sugar bought granola and some berries on top, but that they've made themselves, so that they're taking again a little bit of the control back, that they're learning to take care of their bodies, and it's not all about their parents or their caregivers taking care of them all the time.
Taking them to the food shops as well, taking them to, if you're lucky enough to have, a farmer's market or a farm shop near you, and taking them to go and see where the food comes from, even taking them to the supermarket and taking them around, letting them pick out their own food. Again, we are all in a rush. We want to get these things done, but just involving children in that process, I think as well, can be really beneficial.
You've just reminded me, but one of the things I'll generally give to a child is, I want you to add 2 vegetables into the shopping basket when your parent or caregiver is online and placing that order. You need to pick 2 things, and you need to do something different with them that week, or you need to organize something or think about something different with that. And it's about the variety, isn't it? I had this guy come in and I said to him, do you eat vegetables regularly? And his response was, absolutely, I'm brilliant on vegetables. I remember it so well. He said, I eat vegetables every single day. And I said, wonderful, tell me what you eat. And he said, peas and corn every day. And then I looked at him and I said, and he said, that's it, peas and corn every day. And I was like, okay, well, we're going to have to change that up a little bit. We're going to have to add a few different things. And then he looked at me horrified that I was going to change this plan that he was really healthy because he had his 2 veg every day. But you can play. I think food needs to be fun. Cooking needs to be fun.
And children do find cooking fun. They find food fun. They find cooking fun. They find baking fun. Even food shopping, if you make it fun for them, they can really enjoy it. I think it is something that children can really get into and get behind.
For sure. And on the topic of food, I think taking your phones and taking them off the table while we're having dinner, I've got to touch on that, because taking the time to talk and relax and chew your food properly while you're eating. This is another problem that we all see. I think all of us nutritional therapists see a lot in our clinic. Everyone's in such a rush to wolf down their food, and they're on their mobile, or they're watching TV, or they're gaming, or they're reading some work document whilst they're having their meal, and they're not interacting with each other. We don't have that relaxed environment when we eat the way that our grandparents did. And I think trying to bring that back is really, really important, because when we chew our food and we take our time, we create the enzymes, the chemicals we need to break food down properly. We create those enzymes, and they're key in being able to absorb all the nutrition that we're eating. There's no point in eating the best diet in the world if you're not able to absorb it into your bloodstream and into your body to be able to use as building blocks.
I do a lot of the comprehensive stool tests, sort of 3-day stool tests with the people that I work with. And I very, very rarely see, there's one part on it, this is to do with the chewing that you're talking about. There's one part on it that's got the muscle fibers and the vegetable fibers. And normally most people are chewing the muscle fibers, because we tend to have that automatic thing of, if we don't chew a lump of meat, we know we're going to choke. But most of the time, and this is on, I would say 95% of these stool tests that come back, vegetable fibers come up as showing in the stool test, which just means that those foods really have not been digested fully. They've not been, more often than not been chewed properly. That's often the common reason. And it's one of those things that I will always just say to people, I'll just pick up on it and just say, look, quite often there's other much more bigger issues going on in the stool test. But it will just be something that I will say to them, look, this is a really easy win. This is something that you can literally change today, and you will start getting a benefit from it when you go and have your dinner this evening, because you're just going to chew that food so much better, and you will uptake the nutrients from that food better. Okay, yes, some people are not taking up foods well, they're not digesting foods well, they've got digestive issues going on, and we need to work on those as well. But that chewing of the food is just one of those really, really simple things that can be a big win. I don't think we also realize how much we need to chew food either. I think people think they are, if you ask people, they will say, I chew my food really well, and I eat quite slowly. And actually they're really not, and they're not chewing food well, and they are not eating slowly, they're eating quite fast.
And actually, interestingly, a lot of the processed food that we buy from the supermarkets, things like, the crisps that will literally dissolve in your mouth, you put it on your tongue and it dissolves, or even bread that you buy from the supermarket, as opposed to the crusty sourdough bread that you get from a really decent baker's. The amount of chewing involved and the amount of chewing needed for both is very different. You will eat a lot more of the processed type carbs, let's say, those supermarket breads, because they literally dissolve in your mouth and you wolf them down. Same with things like vegetables, a salad. It's much harder to wolf down a salad than it is to wolf down pasta. It's very important that we have enough of those really good high fibrous foods.
It's so important. What are some of the big change or small changes for big impact, I should say, things that parents could do today from listening to this without getting their children tested and all of that and all of the things we've sort of talked about? What are some of the things that they could just do today that would really make a big impact on their child's emotional and sort of physical health?
My number one would probably be that variety of vegetables that we talked about. So I'd say try and mix things up. Kids get very comfortable with the same fruit and the same vegetables. So just encourage them to try and diversify a bit. And you yourself as a parent can also switch things up without the kid necessarily knowing that you've done it. So if you're having almonds every day, or if you're having peanut butter, you can switch that to almond butter, or with regards to the almonds, throwing in some pistachios or some Brazil nuts or some walnuts. Second one that I think I see in clinic a lot is not enough protein, particularly at breakfast. Kids are generally having a very, very sugary breakfast. And by sugary, I mean high carb. I don't just mean bars of chocolate. Cereals that parents think they're doing their kids a favor with because they're really high in bran, but actually they've got sugar in them. Or jam on toast, even porridge, which doesn't have anything with it. It can be quite a high blood sugar spike, and that can affect kids' mood and energy through the day. So trying to get some protein in, so things like eggs, nuts, fish, if they're happy to have things like smoked salmon or some tinned sardines on toast. Yogurt is another brilliant one. If you can give them kefir, even better. So I'd say trying to make sure that they have some protein in the morning before starting school will really help manage their blood sugar dips and therefore their mood and their concentration through the day. Water, actually, drinking. That's probably the third one. I don't think kids drink enough, and my kids are guilty of this too. I send them to school with a bottle of water and often they're just too busy or they can't be bothered. Or the worst one is they don't want to waste their playtime on going to the toilet. So they don't drink, so that they don't waste playtime. What I tend to do with my kids is I give them a cup of herbal tea in the morning. And I kind of cheat, don't tell them this, but I use big mugs. So the bigger the mug, as far as they're concerned, it's 1 cup. But I know it's almost like they're having 2 cups just because the mug is so big. So I'll often say to parents, buy a really big mug for each child that's theirs and that they know is their mug. And that's the one they have all their water from or drinks from, because it's almost like having a glass and a half of liquid fluids rather than just having a glass. Lifestyle for kids, I think really look at your screens, really try and work with your kids on finding a very comfortable way, and tell your kids, how do you feel when you come off the screen? How does it make you feel? Because often it will make you feel angry. Lots of dopamine will make you feel, really high, then really low, and potentially really angry. So get your kids to recognize that it's not because you hate them that you want to take the screen away. It's because you actually care about them, and try to find more balance. Spend time outside. This is the best time. It's spring is here.
Yeah.
So, take your kids outside, do something outside, walk home from school with them and chat about their day, or go for a walk to the high street and go pick up a bottle of milk and just say, do you want to come with me? Rather than leaving them at home just to have a little bit of fresh air. And then, go back to basics, like have fun. Things like, do something mad as a parent that your child would never expect. Put the music on in the kitchen while you're preparing dinner, and jump up on the kitchen chairs and start dancing. Your kids will look at you like you're crazy, and then they'll start laughing. And then if you're lucky, they'll actually join in. And I think we just need to have a bit more fun. We've all become a little bit serious.
Yeah, I think that's a really good message for anybody, whether you've got kids or not, because I think you're right. I think we have all become more serious, and we're all so busy. We're all so focused on work, and especially if you've got children, all the extracurricular activities that come after school and all of these things, clubs and stuff like that, that there isn't a lot of downtime. There isn't as much fun as there used to be. And I think that's a really good message to leave it on. We should all have a little bit more fun, whether we're a child or an adult. Monica, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been really interesting talking to you. And I've loved this. I've loved this episode, love this conversation.
Thank you. It's been so nice being on.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Good Health Podcast. Do share the episode with anyone you think it may benefit, and help us to spread the word on all things health and wellness by rating, liking, or subscribing to the podcast. If you want more, you can listen to more episodes on your favourite podcast app, or sign up to my newsletter for my favourite tips, tricks, health advice, brands, recipes, and more at nicolegoodhealth.com/newsletter. Have a lovely week. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Good Health Podcast.